Hello, I'm Bruce Ballin, the Director of Education for SIM1, the Ontario Simulation Network. SIM1's mission is to make Ontario the global leader in healthcare simulation. In fact, we have many world-class leaders in the field, also involved with personal support worker training and professional development. And this is part of the whole series of videos you're about to see. In this particular video segment, we're going to cover the key concepts of simulation, things that underlie it that can be applied for all healthcare simulation, but we will take some time to also show and let you reflect how you can take these principles and use it specifically for PSW training around helping people with aging at home. It's the replication or emulation or imitation of creating an experience based on real life where you can have people go into it, use it as an educational experience that educators can then talk about and debrief with. When you come to a new experience, you usually freeze up and don't know what to do unless you get into some sort of practice to deal with it. That's why we do simulations around CPR, ACLS, or as you're going to do around PSW actions, to kind of say, whoa, rather than just freeze there and stand still, you have some basic training, even in a simulation about, oh, no heartbeat, whatever, let's go into the CPR ABCs. Or, for example, rather than emergencies all the time, it could be communication skills you don't want to freeze up on, because you will be probably dealing with a lot of family members as you're helping people in their homes. Maybe an angry family member shows up saying, excuse me, this place looks like a pigsty, I don't understand, what are you doing here, I don't get it. How do you respond? You could read in a book, this is what you do, but through a simulation under stress, suddenly you can actually operationalize the knowledge and make sure you won't freeze up in those situations. And that's the beauty of simulation. It can be used for many things, but you must always remember it's a methodology, a teaching methodology. It's not a standalone thing. It's in the service of helping people achieve goals. So if you're teaching about best practice principles, you might be using simulation to do so. And it always has to be within that whole context about having goals, methodology such as simulation, but then also making sure you're actually achieving the outcomes you want through your goals. So you need an evaluation or an assessment principles put in there as well. And through that, you can keep on making sure your goals are met, and you can make sure your simulations are set up properly to achieve them. So now we've talked a bit about the concepts and key ideas around simulation. I just wanted to also point out the difference between being a simulationist versus a content expert versus a facilitator. Many people in the healthcare professions in their training programs get dumped on, almost say, you do the simulation, and yet they're not actually trained or have the knowledge or skills to actually do the simulation. To make a simulation work, you have to have some background in understanding how to take content and turning it into some living narrative for people to experience. That's what the simulationist does. The content expert, on the other hand, might not know how to do that, but they might know how to do all sorts of PSW skills, like they're the masters of being able to teach about using lifts or being able to communicate with family or whatever it is. They know about that from a clinical perspective, skills perspective, but they don't know how to turn it into a story or build it in a way that will interact with people. That's the difference there. There's a third set of skills, knowledge, and attitudes, the facilitator, which is the person, the educator, who actually knows how to brief people before they go into this simulation, knows how to facilitate the actual simulation and modulate it in a safe way, and then know how to debrief the people to get all the great educational nuggets they wanted to get out of it. Now, often one person is all three of those roles, but that can be very tiring, versus trying to think about making a team when you're building these simulation centers and programs, about having people who might be doing the technical simulation, the education aspects of simulation, the content experts that work with them, and who actually is the best person to actually interact with the students and learners to make it all happen. One of the key things you must understand then is the whole element of the climate of education, this learning climate, needs to be one of trust. The day you lose trust with the learners, they're not going to buy into things anymore. And the reason why the trust is so important is you have to stress the learners for them to learn what you want them to learn, which is, according to the evidence, if it's too low of a stress level, they don't care, it's not interesting to them, the experience is useless. However, if you make it too stressful, it can actually sometimes traumatize people or totally turn them off to the whole profession. So the key is learning how to modulate that stress. That's part of the facilitation skills. And so basically you're telling learners, I'm going to put you into an artificial situation based on reality, which is so, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw things at you. Yes, sometimes I'm going to hold some information back. I'm going to throw things, but I am going to make sure that I'm doing it because you know and I know it's for your education. You know, that I have your best interest in mind. I'm not here just to torture you. I'm not here to make you cry. That is not my goal. My goal is to help you learn through experiential learning about the topics and best practices we want to learn. Is that okay? And here's some safety things, such as if you're feeling uncomfortable, you can time out, or a million other different techniques you can use as a facilitator. That's the real essence to it, because you do want to push them to a point sometimes to not know what the right answer is, or to get to that indecisive moment of saying, I really thought this is how it was supposed to be done. But now they've done this scenario, I'm not sure. My mind is now open to discuss it in the debriefing to get all these cool educational things I came for in the first place. Another barrier to why people sometimes are not wanting to get into simulation is they have this conception that it costs a lot of money. You need lots and lots of money, all these $100,000 mannequins and all these virtual reality helmets. But that's not the case. I'm going to go back to education principles again. It's all about matching how real do you need the simulation to be to meet your objectives, or what we call how much fidelity do you require, which means 100% fidelity is reality, 1% fidelity is really low fidelity. And so let me give you an example of a really low fidelity simulation. Right here, I have something. Now you might think, what could this be? Most of you might actually say, it's an orange, which is true. But it also is something else, depending what sort of training program you're in. I'll give you an example for myself in nursing. I don't think in PSWs you do injections per se, but we got trained sometimes on using this as an injecting training simulator. So the whole point is, it's an orange, but part of that principle I was telling you about before is you have to engage someone's imagination a little bit to say, well, imagine this orange is like skin, and you're going to inject it and learn how to use it in that way. So that's extremely low fidelity simulator. But here, I'm going to increase the fidelity just a little bit more. Yes, it does cost a little bit of money to actually get a marker, but you might already have one. I am not Leonardo da Vinci, so please be okay with what I draw here. So here we have another simulation, maybe a little higher fidelity than last time, but usually when I flash this around to people make faces like this, or they say, wow, it's sad, or it's a sad orange. Well, oranges can't be sad, yet somehow people are getting an emotional response from me putting magic marker on an orange. So as you can see, there's many different levels of fidelity. So I could have an orange, or I could have what some of you have in your labs, mid-fidelity mannequin. Some places have high-fidelity mannequins, but they cost lots of money. It gets back to, what do I really require for my curricula? How detailed do I need to actually have my role players? Do I need a standardized patient, somebody trained in the ability to do a role over and over again and give feedback? Or can we actually do the role playing with our own resources in our own center because that's all we require for this. Do I need just somebody to stand there with an IV pole or whatever it's going to be? Or how detailed do I have to make this scenario? Do I just need a couple of broad brushstrokes, or it has to be highly detailed to really get people into this? And again, it'll always tie back to what are your objectives and what's the context of your learners. So now that we talked about educational principles and the modalities and fidelity, I want to talk about hybridizing or mixing those modalities together to match your educational goals, which can be quite powerful because it's better than any one modality alone. Having just a mannequin or e-simulation by itself can only do so much. The key is, how do you blend this throughout your curriculum? So let's say as part of your PSW training, you have to learn how to do dressing changes for different types of wounds. So for example, week 1, perhaps the learners, students are online learning it through an e-simulation, reading about how you do it, seeing videos. The next week they go into a sim lab where they have task trainers. So maybe some fake arms and so on, where they're actually learning how to do the dressing changes that way. But then the next week you've increased it up to another notch of fidelity, where now the wounds and the dressings are actually part of a real person, where they're put on a standardized patient, let's say. And so when the learners come in, they can't just go and do the technical skill. They need to do a communication skill, which probably is tied into the curricula goals as well. And so by actually engaging the person to be able to do the technical skill becomes part of the whole success story. Thank you very much again for taking the time to watch this video. I hope some of the material here will be of use for you in developing simulations to train people in supporting those who are aging in the community and at home.